So a few months ago I was looking to buy a subharmonicon, and I love the look of it, I love the feel of it, and I love the sounds that were coming out of it, but I found that there wasn't really a way in other than just buying it and kind of messing around with it. This video is kind of what I was looking for when I was looking to buy a subharmonicon, a kind of no BS look at what can I do to just get started and start creating some tunes on it really. I'm not going to go into subharmonics and what polyrhythms are, I'm just going to show you how to create them, what they sound like and what you can do and where you can go from there. Again, there's going to be loads of different things you can do with this, but this is just a quick start guide. So strap in and let's create some polyrhythms. So there's a lot going on with the subharmonicon. There's the semi-modular part of it where you can patch it. There's the synth part of it where you can mess around with all the knobs you'd find on a normal synth. But there's also the polyrhythms and the subharmonics. So there's loads that's actually going on in this specific instrument. Now, what I find is that there's loads of reviews online that say it's a little bit too complicated or that people just get bored with it. And I think the reason is that it can be really easy to get bogged down in all of the things that are going on all at the same time. So the best thing you can do to start off with is actually to find a really simple starting point. Now, for me, that starting point is exactly what you see on your screen right now. So let's just turn this up a second. So what you're hearing is just VCO 1. I've turned the sub 1 and sub 2 levels down on both of the oscillators, and, well, in fact, the second oscillator is completely turned down. I've also turned the decay on the filter and the amp down to a little bit left of noon, just so we can get a really, really tight sound when we're trying to find those notes that are going to work together for our polyrhythms and our sequences. You want to make sure when you start off that the octave is on 1. Now, yeah, that's relatively boring to start off with because you're only using 1 octave, but what you'll actually find is it's easier to find some of those polyrhythms when you're only using that 1 octave. And also, equal temperament, you want to make sure that's on 8 to start off with. If you want to be a bit of a cowboy, you can try a few of the other ones on there with the quantize button, but really I'd start off on 8 just until you're really, really happy that you can make a great polyrhythm on this instrument. Now, the last thing that I want to kind of come on to before we create our first sequence is a little bit of reverb. So you can hear a touch of reverb. It might not be the end reverb that I use on the song that I'm going to make. However, what it does is exactly the same as when you're recording a vocalist in a studio. That little bit of reverb just makes you feel like you can get the creative juices flowing a little bit quicker. So, with all of this in mind, we've got a great starting point to start creating some of those happy accidents that the subharmonicon can give you. So let's come right on to making our first sequence. All we now have to do is we just have to mess with these top 4 knobs on sequencer 1 until we find something we like. So let's see what we can get out of it. Now, I've just messed around with them once, and what you can do on here as well is just make the rhythm a touch faster, because if you're like me and you're thick, you might find that when it goes a little bit slower, you've forgotten what the notes on step 1 and 2 are by the time you get to step 4. So actually, if you just put the rhythm up a bit, you can hear how they flow together, and we can make that go slower again in a second. Now, that sounds a bit too happy for my liking, but we're going to go with it anyway. Now, let's add sub 1 on there. Now, you'll see that nothing's changed yet because I turned the level up just a little bit to the right-hand side of noon. And let's find the frequency that we like to work with this. Okay, something very, very simple. Obviously, it's going to go together. Now, it's worth noting at this point, because I'm a guitarist, I always whack all these knobs up to 11 whenever I get a chance. But to really sculpt a great sound, what you actually need to do is you need to make sure that when you're on the mixer, you don't push anything up too much. So when we're coming over to this sub frequency 2, I want to make it a bit beefy. And then I'm going to turn it down just so it shapes that sound. And with I'd just have oscillator 1 on here for sequencer 1 assigned for now, just because it gets a bit complicated when we start off. So now I like what we've got there. I mean, it is quite happy, but it's going to have to do. I'm going to turn down sub 1 and sub 2, and I'm going to come on to VCO 2. Now we've got the exact same setup here. Now if I press sequencer 2, it'll play as well, but obviously it's only playing the same note. So now I need to find some notes that go with sequencer 1. Now if I click reset, it might make it a bit easier for me. Is it just me, or if I just find Frere Jacques? I've literally found Frere Jacques on the subharmonicon. Let's I mean, I thought this had a bit of a nursery rhyme thing going on here, so let's. Now, I find a lot of people kind of stick at this point because they can kind of make it sound good, because if we turn the sub up now, it's simple, it sounds musical, but if I'm being honest with you, it's not really enough, because you've spent all this money on a subharmonicon, or you're probably gonna spend all this money on a subharmonicon. You want to get the most out of it. So what we want to do now is we want to now turn this into a polyrhythm. Before we go any further, it's worth noting that with the polyrhythms, it's just going to start sounding weird when you start. So the point between where we're at, where, okay, I've got a bit of a melody going on, to I've got a really good polyrhythm, you need to kind of jump over that hurdle a little bit. So the best way to do this is I like to use sequencer 1 as kind of like a little bit of a bass line. So I slow rhythm 1 and I keep sequence 1 on there, and I slow it right down. So now when I click play, then I turn the sub levels back up. So now I've kind of got like a bit of a bass backbone going on with my my sequence. I'm now going to add sequencer 2. Now remember, as soon as you start trying to make the polyrhythm, it just starts sounding a bit weird. And again, we could just leave it here and it might sound okay, but really the best thing we want to do is we want to add 2 rhythms to it. So let's do that. And again, I haven't added the sub level 1 and 2 yet to VCO2 because I want to now work on the polyrhythm. It still sounds really happy, but we're going to go with it. Now that sounds alright, but what usually happens at this point is that you get to a stage where you're like, I've been now working on this for about 5 or 10 minutes, and is it good or is it complete junk? And that's honestly what polyrhythms feel like. So what I want to do next is I want to make it feel like it's going to be in a song. Remember that I could be adding lots of different instruments to this. I could be using the Dfam, I could be using the Mother 32, I could be adding some piano to it. But at this stage, I want to really feel where this happy accent is going to take me. And the best thing to do to see what your polyrhythm sounds like is to add a bass drum. So what we're going to do next is let's add a bass drum and see what that sounds like. So I've got a machiner behind me, and I'm just going to play a bass drum on a 4/4 time to see what that sounds like. as you can see, all of a sudden what that does is it kind of translates what that polyrhythm sounds like into something that starts to feel a lot like a song. And that really makes a big difference, because now in what is essentially roughly about 10 minutes, you've now got a polyrhythm that would have been really hard to make on your own, ready to go, and ready to start thinking about how you're going to put that happy accident into a song. So what you can do next is you can build on that. Now, remember I said before about using the sequencer 1 as kind of like a bit of a bass line, and sequencer 2 as kind of like a lead playing a polyrhythm. Well, we can do the exact opposite, using the polyrhythms on here, and also by swapping over the sub levels on here as well. So all we're going to do now is I'm going to press play. We'll have the bass drum running in the background so we can still kind of feel what the song's going to sound like, and swap over sequence 1 with sequence 2 on both sides, and then change the subs, which are kind of giving us a bit of bass on both sides, to see what actually happens. So let's give that a try. So let's turn. Now all we've done now is we've flipped it around the other side. And we can mess around with that if we want. And all of a sudden, we've got the makings of the song we like, and we're not really changing a lot at all. All we're doing is leaving the notes the same on both sequences, and then just playing with it until it sounds like something good. We can even add now a little bit more of a tail on our decays. And you hear how that bass rhyme is really making a difference to keep it all in place in our head. So there you have it, getting started with the subharmonicon. Like I said, that we've just spent just about 15 minutes making a really, really good polyrhythm and getting some things we can really work with. And we haven't even done any patching yet. And so if I could give you any tips or advice on this, it would just be to start off really simple and start building. And as soon as you feel like you're losing your way, add a little bit of a bass drum. If the bass drum doesn't really feel like it's adding anything, strip it back and see what you can do. Thank you very much for sticking with me, and I look forward to seeing you on next video, which is probably just going to be a song. I might do something with this, maybe make Frere a Jacka. Have a great day.